Hello, hello. Welcome to the 34th episode of the Veggies Abroad Vegan Travel Podcast with the Chief Veggie Pusher, myself, Rebecca Gady-Sawicki. Some of you may already be familiar with Veggies Abroad, but for those of you who aren't, we're a full-service vegan travel company that offers custom planning services, small group trips, a helpful blog chock full of just about everything a vegan or veg-curious traveler could possibly need, and this podcast. With this podcast, I aim to amplify the voices of businesses championing vegan and vegan-friendly options, responsible tourism practices, the environment, community impact, and more. All things that we need more of and must actively support. About a month ago, I was on a podcast for a travel media company. They brought me on to talk about the rise in vegan travel, something that within the industry is a bit of a foreign concept. But before I got into the growth of the market and why it's something everyone in the business needs to pay attention to, we discussed trending news headlines, one of which was tariffs. At the time, the tariffs had just been put on pause with the hopes that something could be worked out to avoid disaster. Unfortunately, crisis wasn't averted. These tariffs are going to cause major pain across the board. It's not just avocados and cars. It's everything, including travel. Canadians and Mexicans are the two biggest visitors to the United States. The U.S. Travel Association estimates that a 10% reduction in Canadian tourism could lead to $2.1 billion in lost revenue and result in the loss of 14,000 jobs across the U.S. Michigan, where I live, shares a close relationship with Canada, and it faces one of the most significant economic threats due to its heavy reliance on cross-border travel. Over 1 million Canadian tourists visit Michigan annually, and they contribute to the state's $26 billion tourism sector. But why the heck am I sharing all this with you guys? Well, as I've said before, we have to really be conscious of where we're spending our dollars. It always matters, but right now, for some businesses, it could be a matter of keeping their doors open or shutting them. I'm going to guess that just about all of you listening try to be conscious consumers. You're probably passionate about a myriad of things, the environment, equality, animal welfare, among others. And there's no better time than now to ensure that all of those businesses championing all of those things continue to do just that. But they can't do it alone. Me too, need you. In all of my travel planning for clients and tours, I always seek out companies that align with the mission and values of Veggies Abroad. But I've realized that in this climate, that might not be enough. Last week, I was part of a call with a member of the U.S. House of Representatives to discuss the implications of what's happening, job cuts, safety, tariffs, etc. And we'll continue to try and have more of those conversations and keep the pressure going. You might not realize this, but you can actually request an audience with your representative too. I am also working on putting something together about companies that you might want to skip booking because of their monetary and political allegiances. But in the meantime, I urge you to investigate before you buy something. You can use apps like Goods Unite Us or check out Open Secrets to see who's funding who. If you've been buying products produced by a small company or entrepreneur that you love, say from a company like Amazon or Target, don't stop supporting them. See if there's a way that you can buy directly from them. This is where things can sometimes get sticky. It's often popular for wide sweeping boycotts to be declared, like the world wanting to boycott all of the US. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, the ones who feel it the most and often can't survive it aren't the ones that we all need and want to take down. I know this is challenging, but we can't be complacent. We've got to fight for what matters. We are stronger together. Now, speaking of fighting for what matters, today's guest is doing just that. If you remember back in November, I had Hinkle Smith from the Offset Alliance on to discuss carbon offsets. And today we're going to slightly switch gears to chat about another climate initiative, carbon removal. Sometimes the two get confused, but I also think carbon removal doesn't get near the amount of attention that offsets do. And the technology is truly incredible. It's something we across the globe need and must support. So joining me today is Christina Beckmann, who is leading the way with Tomorrow's Air to educate, inspire, and mobilize a global collective to reduce, remove, and permanently store carbon dioxide emissions. With 20 years of experience in sustainable tourism, Christina has worked in more than 30 countries on projects for clients including national governments, philanthropic foundations, and local entrepreneurs with environmental sustainability at their core. A frequent speaker and writer at sustainable tourism conferences, Christina is an author and contributor to numerous works published in the travel trade and popular press, including National Geographic's Riding the Hula Hula to the Arctic Ocean and the Routledge Handbook of Tourism Impacts. Committed to future leaders, Christina generously devotes time to mentor and support students working at the intersection of climate, travel, and social entrepreneurship. In the past, she has collaborated with students from Cambridge University, George Washington University, the University of California at San Diego, and others. Originally from Alaska, Christina now divides her time between San Francisco, California, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. Let's chat with Christina. Christina, it is so lovely to have you on, and I'm looking forward to this chat. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm delighted to meet you and learn more about the Veggies Abroad podcast and vision.
Well, that's fantastic. I like it when it's a two-way street of learning. So let's start kind of with a bit of an overview of Tomorrow's Air for people and share, what you do, your mission. Why are you here? Why is Tomorrow's Air here, not you physically?
Why? Well, I'm here. I'm here for Tomorrow's Air. Tomorrow's Air has a vision of helping to clean the air of excess carbon dioxide. I think most people are very aware at this point that society has waited too long to reduce its emissions. We're now in a position where we need to dramatically reduce our emissions. We also need to clean up the CO2 that's in our atmosphere. I learned in Antarctica, actually, in 2018. I was on a sort of learning expedition with people from all over the world who have environmental missions. That is where I really started to internalize and learn that carbon dioxide, once emitted, lives in our atmosphere for 1,000 years or more. And we have enough, of course, our natural systems cycle that CO2 out, but we now produce so much that we've got this, backlog. And this is something that we need to not only reduce our emissions so we're not adding to it, but we need to clean it up. We need to actively pull more out of the atmosphere faster than our natural systems can do. And there's a category of solutions that can do this. And when I learned about those in 2018, I was like dumbfounded. Like, why have I never heard about this innovative class of carbon removal solutions that people are out here working on? And so Tomorrow's Air was started to help build awareness for these kinds of solutions and raise funding to help propel them forward. So we are an initiative of the Adventure Travel Trade Association. We invite travel companies and travelers to contribute, to pay money into this mission.
Amazing. So when you talk about cleaning the air or carbon removal, what exactly do you mean? Like, how do you clean the air? How do you remove carbon?
So there are numerous technologies that are being developed that can do this. We have a portfolio that uses three of these kinds of technologies that have been identified as having very great potential to scale. They are at low volume today, but they do have great potential to be operating at higher volume in the future. And for that reason, they've been earmarked for investment. They're getting most of the focus and the attention. And these technologies are direct air capture, biochar, and enhanced rock weathering. And all of these technologies take CO2 from the atmosphere. I can describe them in sort of layperson terms.
That'd be great.
And allow it to be stored permanently. So Tomorrow's Air is focused on solutions that once the CO2 is absorbed from the atmosphere, it then becomes stored permanently. Our natural systems, plants, trees, ocean, we need desperately to conserve our natural spaces. We need to conserve forests for the CO2 that they can absorb. We also know that natural systems cycle CO2 and they will re-release. They don't hold it permanently. And we now need both. We need all of these things. So Tomorrow's Air is focused on this category of solutions that offer permanent storage.
That is super interesting, the idea of permanently storing something. How do you ensure that it is permanent?
Well, the technologies that we're working with, in the case of, I'll give you the case, for example, of direct air capture. So direct air capture, these are modular machines. They're maybe the size of a small car. They're getting even smaller, but they suck air into the machine with a fan. There's a highly selective filter material within the machine. The carbon dioxide molecules adhere to that. Everything else passes out the back. When the filter is saturated, you shut the trapdoor and the CO2 molecules are released. They can then be mixed with water and injected underground into basaltic rock formations. Basalt is an extremely porous kind of rock, and so this kind of carbon dioxide fizzy water mixture finds its way into the pores in the basaltic rock, and it mineralizes within 2 years. So it becomes rock. And if you see like a drill core of this, what you can see in the slice off is sort of these crystally, salty looking veins running through the rock. So the mineralized CO2 is how we say it is stored permanently.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know.
So
I know.
I feel like my mind is blown.
The other thing I learned is that basalt underlies more of the Earth's surface than any other mineral. So we don't have a storage problem. We have a
capture problem.
Pull it out of the atmosphere capture problem. And then all kinds of questions will come up, like how. Can you hear the dogs?
It's okay.
Anybody walks by, you just can't. I can't win.
It's totally appropriate to have dogs in the background on a vegan podcast. I mean, come on.
Okay, yeah.
Totally
They're
fine.
adopted dogs.
Even better.
Adopted cattle dogs. One of them only has 3 toes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, add my bona fides. I'm right there.
Yes, you are.
People will ask questions like, how much energy is used to power the machine? Like, are you expending more energy?
Yeah, good question.
And creating more CO2? So the machines are powered in the case of one of our partners, which is a company called Climeworks. They've received a ton of press. They are in Iceland, and their machines run on geothermal energy. Another one of our partners is a newer company called Octavia Carbon. We're really excited about. They're located in Kenya, where they are running on solar energy. So I bring that up because although we have many, many places to store CO2, there are some limiting factors on where it's feasible to operate these machines in an efficient way. So direct air capture is one category of solution that Tomorrow's Air is supporting. Another interesting one is called biochar, which I can also talk about.
Yeah, go for it.
Biochar is created from organic material. In the case of our partner, which is a company called Pacific Biochar, they're taking forest thinnings. So, in order to prevent forest fires, like what we've just been living through, they will frequently clear out underbrush, clear out this sort of, I don't know how you say, forest material.
Sure.
This holds CO2 within it. When this material is burned in the absence of oxygen, which is a process called pyrolysis, you end up with this sort of charcoal-like material. It looks black, like charcoal. This charcoal resists decomposition and thereby holds the carbon dioxide that is within it for many, many thousands of years. And that char can be mixed with compost. So our partner, Pacific Biochar, has relationships with compost providers. So it is then used to improve the soil. It's used in farming. So that's a really interesting one in the sense of I kind of think of it as it's a technology, but it's also natural.
Yeah.
And there's evidence that even ancient people, I mean, they've found biochar like in the Peruvian Andes. They've found it in the Brazilian Amazon. So I also sort of philosophically, I love the idea of biochar. It's like, it's the future, but it's also our human historic past. It's perfect for us to be supporting and expanding and trying to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to, the roots, pun intended, because then it's also, it sounds like it's good for the soil with the things that it's putting back in there, probably good for the plant life.
It improves the soil.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And when it's, so if you use the biochar for, let's say, 5 years or so, that doesn't affect its release. It still can hold on to that carbon?
Yeah.
Wow.
It does. Yeah. If you start getting into the biochar research, it is a little bit dazzling. It is, of all of these technologies, probably the one that's been studied the longest.
Okay.
There are so many papers looking at how long CO2 is held through biochar. There's a podcast I listened to recently that said probably even longer than we thought, maybe 1 million years.
Wow.
Anyway, there's a lot of science on the duration, but it is definitely what we would consider to be permanent in terms of, multiple generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then the third one that you have is using rocks.
Yeah. The third one, our third partner, is a company called Ion, which works through a process called enhanced rock weathering. Mm. I guess maybe this makes sense, but I'd never really thought about it before. It's raining here today. When rain falls from the sky, these water droplets are catching carbon dioxide molecules are in that rainwater. Mm-hmm. When it lands on the ground, there are certain kinds of rocks, stones that it will land on that will absorb CO2. So stones naturally do this. It's called chemical weathering. It's a process by which stones capture carbon dioxide for us. Enhanced rock weathering is saying, let's enhance this natural process. We've discovered that some rocks absorb CO2 more readily than others. So the thinking is, what if we get more of that kind of highly absorbing stone on the surface to catch more CO2? So the stone that does this is called olivine. It's a silicate mineral. So this is pulverized, ground up, and also spread on agricultural fields.
Wow.
Water hits these fields. The olivine absorbs the CO2. It leaks down through the soil into the water table. Bicarbonates are formed, eventually making its way to the sea, where the bicarbonates go to the bottom and remain there, holding their CO2 for thousands of years.
That's an incredible journey.
It's an incredible journey. That was kind of the hardest one for me to wrap my mind around, through the dirt, into the water system, out to the sea. But yes. And there, we have some great graphics on the website. I actually did an interview with a wonderful gal named Eliza Wright. She's not even 30. She's so articulate and funny, and describes this process also very brilliantly. So if anybody wants to head over to the Tomorrow's Air podcast, we have a deep dive on enhanced rock weathering there too.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That seems like a really interesting thing to learn more about. And with all of these, is it easy? Well, I guess easy is probably the incorrect word, because with any of this, I don't think easy is appropriate. But is it, how in the world do you actually measure how much carbon is being removed through these methods? Mm-hmm.
So within the case of Ion, for example, they have tracers that are part, so they can see what chemicals are present in the soil at the time that they apply their product, the olivine, and what's there after a certain number of, after 6 months, after 12 months. In the case of direct air capture, it's purely mechanical. So that's a very easy one to for them to gauge because their CO2 molecules are hitting these filters. For biochar, we're able to tell how much CO2 is stored through a process called elemental analysis, and they basically are just weighing that biochar, and they can determine how much CO2 is in that unit.
Wow. Amazing. It's incredible what scientists are able to figure out. So within this space, I've heard now about Tomorrow's Air, which is carbon removal, but then also there are quite a few companies that are offering carbon offsets. But both of these technologies are different, correct?
Yeah. Well, yes. Yes and no. So carbon offset is a blanket term that has been used and people are very familiar with.
Yes.
What people understand is the mechanism of offsetting. I emitted 1 ton of CO2. I'm purchasing an offset to balance that out.
Mm-hmm.
The offset that you purchase might be I'm spending money to fund a project that is funding, say, a renewable energy plant.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we would call an avoidance offset. In that case, you are helping avoid new emissions to go into the atmosphere.
Or you're totally removing them.
You're not removing legacy emissions that are in the atmosphere. You're just keeping new ones from going in.
Okay.
This is how we mark them out. There are avoidance offsets. There are natural solutions, which we love, plants, trees, ocean,
sure,
that hold CO2 for varying amounts of time. You can also call some of these natural solutions removal. In the case of a forest, it is removing CO2. It's holding it for a certain period of time, usually shorter durations. Now, when the technologies started springing up to differentiate them because they offer permanent storage and because they are either purely technological or hybrid tech, people just started saying removal.
Mm-hmm.
And removal became this sort of shorthand for technical solution. Although some of the natural solutions are also removals. So yes, generally when you hear somebody talking about removals, it's because they're referring to novel forms of carbon dioxide removal that offer permanent storage. And if they're saying offsets, they're usually talking about nature-based solutions or avoidance offsets. I can confuse you even further by saying the technical solutions can also be taken in context of an overall offset. I emitted 1 ton. I'm going to offset that ton with some avoidance credits, with some nature-based credits, mm-hmm. with some technical removal credits. All of that means that I've offset my emitted 1 ton. The problem with the offset and compensation mentality, though, I'm really on a roll now.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Well, I mean, the problem with this narrative, with this way of thinking about it, is it's given us the false sense of having solved the problem.
Right.
I emitted a ton. I purchased these offsets. I'm clear. That is the real hazard in this, is that you're not clear. Your CO2 is living in the atmosphere for generations. If we stopped emitting today, there's enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're on a warming trend for another 900 years. Mm-hmm. So that compensation mentality is very destructive. I don't know. I don't even want to say that because maybe in some cases it's better than nothing. But what we're the narrative, the positioning that we have is we need to clean up the CO2 that's in our atmosphere. If you had a pile of garbage sitting in front of your house and the city said garbage trucks aren't running anymore, you're all going to have to take your garbage to the dump on your own, wouldn't you say to your family every time you leave the house, take a bag of garbage when you go?
Find a way to manage it.
Let's take a bag of garbage. Right. Well, right? And so this is how we're thinking about CO2 in the atmosphere also, is like, there's trillions of tons. Oh my God, it's so much. Let's take a bag. Let me take a bag. Let me take another bag. What if we all get in there and take a couple bags? Mm-hmm. Carbon removal technologies are very expensive right now. As more people use them, as they are deployed, they will become more efficient. The costs will come down. I was working with some companies early on. Tomorrow's Air is hitting its 5-year mark.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I had a couple companies, with us for like a year, and they were like, has the cost come down yet? It's like, no, sweetheart, not yet. It may take, 10 years.
Hey there, fantastic listeners. Let's hit pause on this episode for a thrilling announcement, a golden ticket to globetrot with Veggies Abroad. Veggies Abroad isn't just your go-to for vegan guides and trip planning tips. It's your passport to extraordinary small group journeys, carefully crafted by the ultimate veggie pusher and your favorite podcast host, me, Rebecca Gady Sawicki. I've spent countless hours researching the best vegan hotels, food, and experiences, and now I'm bringing those experiences directly to you. Join me and my newfound veggie pals on escapades to exotic and exciting destinations around the world, whether it's trekking through the Thai jungle to witness elephants in their natural habitat or exploring Iceland's famous ring road. Our adventures are nothing short of spectacular, and guess what? Those aren't the only exciting trips awaiting you. So what are you waiting for? Cruise on over to veggiesabroad.com pronto. Well, how about after this episode is over to explore our dazzling lineup of tours and secure your spot today.
So that's kind of the thinking is, can we aggregate small contributors? So also these, direct air capture companies, biochar, enhanced rock weathering, it is not cost effective. They can't possibly interact with 1,000 consumers who each want to kick in $10, mm-hmm. right? Even though 1,000 consumers who each kick in $10, 100,000 consumers who each kick in $10. Like if you could aggregate everybody's, I bought a coffee the other day. It was $7. So literally a cup of coffee. If you could aggregate everybody, you could. This is my pie in the sky vision. And I also think now is not the time to give up hope, right?
We cannot.
I remember I learned to be a river guide. I was not a good river guide. I was the worst. They put me on the baggage boat. I did not have the right emotional constitution for it. But I will never forget rowing the boat and seeing a rock. I was too close to the edge. There was an overhanging, huge boulder. And as I got close to it, I was like, ugh. And I just...
You wanted to give up?
The oars.
Yeah.
Yes. I did give up. And the guy behind me, a wonderful guy named Clint Blood, who is a real person who was helping me learn to row, Clint starts yelling at me. He's like, don't stop. He's like, you're getting close. This is when you should push harder because you'll miss it by a millimeter, but you'll miss it.
Yep.
And if you just give up, then you're going to bonk your head. So this is really in my heart and soul when it comes to climate these days. It's like, it's hopeless. It's hopeless. Obviously, it's hopeless. The politics are, we're opening up more. We're not reducing our emissions as a society.
Right.
We're escalating our emissions as a society. So sort of ascribe to the hopeless philosophy, you'll be like, well, I don't know, just
it's done, right?
It's done, but I truly, it is not. There are so many innovative, great solutions burbling that if we can just give them enough energy, and what we do today, the $10, Tomorrow's Air to date has ordered close to 600 tons of carbon dioxide for removal and permanent storage. 600 tons, it's like nothing. It's like a
drop in the hat.
But it's a drop, yeah. But the signaling power, right? Like every bit gets better, because now when I talk to companies, they're like, oh, so okay, well, it's the example that you set. It almost gives other people permission to contribute and have hope too.
Right.
Nobody wants to be the dud or the dumb one who continued to be naively hopeful. People will band together. They really,
yes,
they really,
we can't lose hope
will.
For anything.
I don't think so.
No.
So that's what we've done, is kind of create this vehicle, this hopeful vehicle.
I love it.
That is chipping away at the backlog.
You mentioned two interesting things. So one with, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, with carbon offsets, it's not permanent necessarily with an offset. It could potentially be temporary, which is problematic.
Well, I mean, yes and no. If you think about, okay, we're trying to get these permanent solutions to scale, right? That might take 50 years.
Yeah.
60 years. We need short-term we need trees that hold CO2 for 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain trees that will hold CO2 for 500 years, but we need short-term solutions. We need natural solutions for so many reasons, not just the climate reasons, but the biodiversity,
yes,
the habitat. I mean, I had a great conversation with a biodiversity expert, and he was just, he's like, there's so much redundancy built into nature that we need our natural systems, because they protect us in so many ways. So there's absolutely great value in short-term storage of CO2, natural solutions, all the many co-benefits that they offer also.
So we really need all of the things. Not necessarily just a couple of the things, but all of them.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's totally it. And in the past, I used to have conversations with company sort of sustainability leaders, and they would say, well, where can I get the most bang for my buck? Like from where is my money going to be the most useful? And from the perspective of people who struggle, like humans struggle with complexity, actually. We get to a certain point and it becomes too complex and we can't. And so the mind wants to make things as simple as possible. And for your business operations, you want it to be as simple as possible. So let me put my dollar in one place.
Right.
Don't tell me I have to divide my dollar over 5 kinds of solutions. But I'm sorry, that is what you have to do.
Right.
Also, that dollar, some of it has to get allocated to figuring out how to reduce, transforming our businesses to emit less, reshaping our supply chains, retooling ourselves. That's expensive. I mean, if you've got $1, maybe you're putting 50 cents towards retooling inside, and you're putting 50 cents towards a conservation initiative, mangroves, and you're putting 50 cents towards carbon removal with permanent storage, or sustainable aviation fuel. We haven't talked about sustainable aviation fuel, which is another solution that Tomorrow's Air also supports.
Yeah. There's so many sides to all of this. It's not just with the technology investment, but it's also what we are doing. And that's kind of a very good segue. You work with businesses, but you also work with individual travelers, or individual travelers can support Tomorrow's Air, correct?
Yeah. We have on our website sort of a pathway for individuals and a pathway for businesses. So individuals can make a one-time purchase. We've had people say, I'm going on a big trip. I would like to kick into some sustainable aviation fuel for this flight because I'm not feeling great about that.
Yeah.
And this is like something I can do. Individuals can make one-time purchases or subscribe. We have a monthly $10 price of a coffee, $10 a month.
That's awesome. You touched on the sustainable fuel. Let's talk about that just quickly. I think I read, so you guys are using recycled oils in order to create this sustainable fuel?
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's a few different ways you can manufacture sustainable aviation fuel. The way that it is done through our partner, which is a company called Neste, is through what they call waste fats. Mm-hmm. So vegetable oil, animal renderings. Yeah. This is purified into a fuel that is can be mixed with jet fuel. It's what they call a drop-in fuel, and it reduces the emissions from airplanes by up to 80%. So it's extremely powerful. I know. And then the next thing you're going to say is like, why are we not using that? Why don't we just use that?
Right.
Well, because today it's much more expensive than A1
regular jet fuel. Yeah.
So if you powered your entire flight on SAF, it would sustainable aviation fuel. Nobody would buy a ticket on that plane. So it's again a problem of creating enough demand for it that they can then justify investing enough to producing it. And there's also all the, there's the feedstock, right? Gathering up the fats.
Yeah.
In this case, there's also like moving all this new magical fuel through the systems, which are all
it's a whole new supply
established
chain
around fossil fuel.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's an expensive undertaking to retool that system. But our partner is the largest producer today, Neste, and they uplift their fuel at airports in Amsterdam, in Singapore, and maybe one other place. 3 places. So when you purchase sustainable aviation fuel, it's not going on your exact flight, but it is going into the system.
That's great. And what do you think? So looking ahead, right now it's not being utilized a whole ton, but do you see that we're going to have more of an uptick of this over the next 5-10 years? Do you think it's going to take longer for that to really gain footing and gain additional funding?
Well, that's a very meaty question. If you had 5 experts here, you'd probably get five
different answers.
It is definitely trending up. You can see airlines investing in this. Mm-hmm. For example, Alaska Airlines has invested and partnered with a company called 12 that is producing sustainable aviation fuel. There's another way to produce sustainable aviation fuel, which is, I mentioned at the beginning, direct air capture, which takes CO2 from the atmosphere. You can also create sustainable aviation fuel from that CO2 that you've pulled from the atmosphere. So
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's so many really fabulous things happening. So anyway, Alaska Airlines is partnered. More Hope is partnered with this company called 12, and they will be. SAF is chief on their mission. So I think yes, I think we are going to see more and more of it. It is certainly acknowledged as an emissions reduction tool for aviation. There are many other ways that we can reduce the emissions from planes through their design, through the kinds of engines. I would also, some of your listeners may have heard of, there's research now that says certain types of planes at different altitude, it's like an air traffic control problem for certain types of planes. If we could get these certain planes at different altitudes, their emissions, the contrails, that their emissions would be less impactful in the atmosphere. So I can't remember the statistics on this, but I could follow up. You could put it in the notes. It is extremely fascinating. There's like a company building software that would help air traffic controllers be able to direct planes to then have their emissions be much less impactful in the athermosphere. We have a lot of solutions.
There's so many things. Yes.
There's so many things.
We just have to do them all right now.
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest hurdles is, I mean, you're helping solve it here today, is getting the word out so that people hear about it and hear about it in new and fresh places.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, because I even love all this stuff. I don't tune into science podcasts, you know. So it's really great when you get exposed to this stuff, like in a travel podcast. You're like, oh, and now once you've heard about it, you're gonna see it everywhere. You're probably gonna be like, oh, because you've been like a little bit awakened to it. And I think that's a big piece of the opportunity for us as a society right now,
absolutely.
Is to normalize science talk and not be afraid to not be an expert. You know, I don't have to be a scientist or an expert in all this stuff to trust the scientists and to be able to get behind it. And what I have noticed in my sort of travels in climate tech is many people who are very empowered in most of their lives, when they get to a topic of science and climate, are just like, zzz.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say anything,
right?
Because I might say it wrong, or I might, and then people are going to think I'm stupid, or then it's going to get into some political,
right?
And so people just like, it's become one of these like very loaded things that we don't talk about, and that is like holding the solutions back and making, you know, folks are afraid to invest in it. But I mean, it trickles all throughout. You know, you've got not just regular vegan travelers like us, but you know, bankers, very wealthy folks are like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. You know, you need like momentum so that people start to feel confident. Yeah.
Exposure to so many things, I think, is just so important, because you're right. You will see it in so many other ways. You'll think about it. And, you know, with this and with, you know, having these types of conversations, I always feel like I hope that I'm planting a seed for you to think differently about maybe how you'll plan your next trip, maybe how you'll go about it, maybe where you'll spend your money. Because if we all just took, you know, a few moments to, you know, rethink things and do things a little bit differently, this world could be a completely different place. And, you know, this is a good segue into kind of your future, and if there are any exciting initiatives that you're working on currently, or other things that maybe could be rolling out in the next near-ish future.
Yeah, well, our future is to keep going.
That is a good goal.
The biggest thing we have this year is sort of a campaign around our 5-year anniversary. We are always looking at new potential carbon removal suppliers to include in our portfolio. So I'm always poking around in that area. But I don't have any grand announcements beyond. We've made it 5 years. We're continuing to recruit travel businesses and working with, you know, we are an initiative of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, which is a global association, some 1,500 members around the world. But we're kind of Tomorrow's Air has been talking to the true believers, the people who already hold sustainability as like a core value. I've been in this ATTA bubble for a long time, and in this year and going into the future, we're now starting to interact with travel associations whose members are maybe not, haven't had sustainability as a core mission. I mean, I'm a long way from like getting Princess Cruise, like, you know, these kinds of these kinds of travel businesses are not yet at the table with us, but I know some of them are pursuing sustainability initiatives in different ways. I don't mean to
totally fine.
Trash a whole category, but yeah.
So as we wrap things up, I'm curious what your opinion is on the future of sustainable tourism in the next 10 to 20 years. Are you hopeful that we're moving in the right direction? Do you think we're going to continue to see more companies shift to acting responsibly, travelers being more mindful? Where do you think we're headed?
I think we are absolutely headed in having sustainability as a sort of the cost of entry. You know, there's some recent research that shows that younger travelers absolutely have this top of mind and require it. There's a MMGY study that was published. You may have seen it mid last year, 2024. It's like just a little over half of baby boomer travelers are willing to spend more for
I'm surprised it's that much.
Yeah, well, according to this study.
That's great.
I think it was a pretty big piece of research.
Yeah.
Whereas almost 90%, I might not be getting this exactly right, of the Gen X and below, Gen Y, the millennials, Gen Z, all these letters. These people care deeply about it and it influences how they book travel, how they think about it. So I do think we're going to see more and more. I think sustainability has not been the right word. And I think recently sustainability has gotten really tangled up with DEI, which is now getting totally trashed.
Yeah.
I was on another call this morning and we were sort of reflecting on this. It was like, we should just be using the word pollution, you know?
Right.
Nobody
go right down to the bottom of it. Yeah.
And let's talk about that. But I think we're getting smarter at how we talk about it. We've spent 20 years talking about it the wrong way. Now we're figuring out how to talk about it the right way. I mean, if you look at Tomorrow's Air, we're a climate solution that doesn't mention climate, right? We are about air and clean air.
We all need that.
Everybody, we all need that. And so you can think of excess carbon dioxide as a form of pollution. We may shift our messaging even to be more, I think it's a learning journey. So I think a lot of, companies who held sustainability very close and like messaged that are maybe going to learn different ways to talk about it. And as we get like the bigger travel companies engaged, and they will have to because their consumer base is going to
demand it. Yeah,
it.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got a few more years of baby boomers, but eventually you're not taking any more trips.
That's true.
So the customer base is so I do think that it will get better.
You're leaving us with a bit of hope. I love it. Christina, it's been fabulous chatting with you. I'm so glad we got to have this opportunity. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. If you'd also like to learn more about upcoming Veggies Abroad tours or get additional travel help, visit veggiesabroad.com and also join our newsletter. It's the best way to stay up to date with loads of new content, like where to find gorgeous vegan hotels, what to eat in cities around the world, trip planning tips, and so much more. Well, that's all I've got for now. Until next time.